Tell us your name first. Full name.
The name is Philip Vale.
Okay, where were you born?
I was born in the Bronx, New York City. Actually, I was born in a women's hospital in Manhattan.
You get your gender mixed
I
up?
lived in the Bronx.
Oh, okay. And what year were you born?
1924.
You remember it well?
I remember it quite well.
Cool. And when you came home from the hospital, you guys lived where?
We lived on Valentine Avenue in the Bronx.
What about during service? Like when you were in Coast Guard,
Service.
When did music come in? You guys obviously saw USO shows and
We
stuff.
had, if I remember, we had a phonograph on the ship. Basically, we would get movies traded from one ship to another. Sometimes saw the same movie half a dozen times. I do remember there was a movie, I believe, Two Girls and a Sailor, and June Allison and Gloria DeHaven were the actresses, and I actually wrote June Allison a letter from the ship.
Fan letter?
A fan letter, and asked her if she would be our ship's
Mascot?
mascot, and she sent me a picture.
Oh, wow.
So June Allison
You guys
was
put it on the
put it up on a
ship?
bulletin board somewhere, and whatever it was. And we had, there was one Christmas, I'm trying to remember, Jimmy was his last name. He was I think he was an electrician. But anyway, we used to get bales of rags on the ship for down in the engine room and things like that. And sometimes we'd get full clothing, like a dress, which we would tear up into rags.
Right.
And this one Christmas, to put on a thing for the crew, we all dressed up, not all, but several dressed up in women's dresses and put on a musical show. I don't remember exactly what we sang or what we did, but
Like Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon.
yeah, it was something like that. But,
something like it, huh?
yeah, but we did, and we used to have boxing exhibitions on the ship. I boxed. I was never a
didn't know
boxer, and I used to box against. I was a little guy, and I used to box against some of the bigger guys on the ship and take
Were
a
you a
beating.
welterweight? Or?
I was. I
Lightweight?
went in weighing 150, so. I probably gained weight when I was in service.
That's like a middle.
But I might have been even up a light heavy at that time, but it didn't make any difference. It was just 2 rounds, something like that.
Did you like that?
Just the next. It was fun. Boxing, by the way, of all the sports that I've ever been involved in, a 2-minute round in boxing probably is the most exerting sport there is.
I believe it.
Playing basketball, playing volleyball, playing tennis, running marathons, 2 minutes of boxing, moving back and forth and using your fists and avoiding punches. Tough way to go.
Yep. Did you guys ever get to see something live at a USO show or at a harbor?
I saw Marlene Dietrich in Greenland.
Wow.
And
In Greenland?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's about all. I used to go to USO occasionally when I was ashore in Boston or in New York or any place that had one. In Iceland, I was at a USO in Reykjavik. I remember going there.
Iceland's a beautiful country.
Yeah, beautiful.
You were ashore in Iceland for a while?
Yeah, well, what happened was, getting ahead of the story, the ship I was on, but the Coast Guard, one of the Coast Guard ships, I think it was 2 ships, East Wind and the South Wind, had captured a German trawler in Greenland, a spy trawler. And so they captured it, and they were taking it to Reykjavik. And what happened was, apparently either the one of them broke down, so we joined the Storis and brought the shipment to be detained and taken to Iceland. Interesting, the Storis, which ran a lot up, the master of arms on that ship was Victor Mature.
Oh, wow.
I joined the Coast Guard in October 1942. I in turn then was called into service in November. I took my boot training, basic training at Manhattan Beach, which was not very far from home, but a lot farther from home than I'd ever been. Things were tough then because it was November. They had no P coats. The only thing they offered, they issued to the raincoats, and we used to go out on the longboats, into the ocean with just a raincoat on. We also did the manual of arms with wooden rifles because they didn't have enough Springfields at that time. That was the Springfield 1903 that they were still using. Then, after I finished boot, I went up to Boston to receiving station. I stayed in Boston. From Boston, they shipped me up to South Portland, Maine. In South Portland, Maine, I was assigned. It was what they call a captain of the port operation. Captain of the port in the Coast Guard was guarding the docks, guarding shipyards, all kind of onshore activities to make sure that nothing was going wrong at those places. This one day I was on guard at the entrance to the shipyard in South Portland. Mm-hmm. And the requirements were nobody could get on the shipyard without a ID card. And I'm standing there with 45 on my hip, and I don't even think I had a club at that time, but a 45 on my hip. And this guy, about 6'2", comes down and with his lunch pail and said he's going to work. And I said, "May I see your ID card?" He said, "Oh, I left it home." I said, "Well, you can't go down." He said, "What do you mean? I work there and I'm going down. I don't care what you say." And what was I going to do? The orders were nobody goes down without a card. So how was I going to stop him? So I pulled my gun. I said, "Sir, you're not going down." I get picked up and brought back to the base, and when I get at the base, there's a message waiting for me that the captain of the area wants to see me. So I go down to South Portland to a downtown office, and I go up, and I'm still 18 years old. I'm still wet behind the ears, and I'm going up to see a captain. "Yes, sir. You were on duty at the shipyard day before yesterday?" "Yes, sir. Yes, sir." "You're here now at a captain's mast." There wasn't a court-martial, but it was a captain's mast.
A reprimand, basically.
Well, basically, more than a reprimand, but anyway.
Disciplinary action.
Yeah, you were. There was a complaint made against you that you removed your revolver from the holster and threatened somebody that they couldn't get down. I said, "Yes, sir." I said, I'm a kid, am I talking to a guy like I'm a big shot? The orders were nobody goes down with an without an ID card, and that was the only way I could make sure that stuck. Well, I ended up with 30 days, no liberty, and restricted to the base because I had pulled my gun.
What was their alternative? What did they say you should have done in such a situation?
They never told me what I should have done, other than what I shouldn't have done. I mean, that was, it's easy when you go into having trouble like that. The alternative is not available. The thing is, what you did wrong was available, and that was the only thing that they were going.
I know what you're talking about.
It's a difficult situation, and I lived with it, and I tried to do my just duty from then on without getting in too much trouble. But I did get into trouble on occasion.
You got into trouble?
I got into trouble the next time. If I'm allowed to discuss this, since it's
I think it's the statute of limitations.
It's biographical.
Right.
We were up in Halifax.
Uh-huh.
We had Liberty, starboard Liberty, or whatever I was on, supposed to be till midnight. I go out and in Halifax in those days, I don't remember whether I was with a bunch of guys or not, but you could buy a bottle of booze, one bottle. And I was drinking, and I was going to go to a tattoo parlor to get a tattoo. On my way there, I meet a lady of the night. Lady of night and I go out to a motel way out of town. Supposed to be back at midnight. 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm rushing now. I have no money left. I had to take a bus. I took a taxi out there, but I had to take a bus because I paid her whatever the going rate was. And luckily, I get down to the waterfront. Comanche, the ship that I was on, was supposed to lead the convoy out, was supposed to be the lead ship. And I come down and I see the ships going, leaving the harbor. And these were freighters, very slow, but they're moving. And just as I get down to the dock, here's our ship's launch. Came ashore. The chief yeoman had come ashore to notify the shore patrol that I was AWOL. Luckily, I made the ship because they were there, so I didn't have to notify anybody. And the captain reamed me out again. No court martial. A captain's mast again. He up and down. I think I had 60 days without liberty. Because he was not only that, he was embarrassed because he was supposed to be the lead ship, and now he's going to be the last ship leaving. You know, and that was a whole thing.
He probably never forgave you for that.
I never had any problem with again. The last problem I had a fight with a guy ashore, but that was nothing.
Physical fight?
Yeah.
What happened?
A guy, I was waiting to go back to the ship. This was it on the Comanche or on the transport? I don't know, one of my guys who used to work for me, I was a second class petty officer, and he was maybe a fireman or somebody, and he was a snotty guy, and we were working, go back to the ship, and he started to mouth off, and next thing we had a fight. No problem. The last problem, and the worst one, because it happened, I lost my good conduct medal. I come off watch, we were in port. I stood a 4-8, I think. I come out of the engine room, and I'm sitting on the mess deck. And I was reading whatever I was doing. And the chief bosun's mate comes up and says, listen, we're loading supplies. Come on up. We need you on deck. I said, that's a job for the deck force. I'm in the engine room. I don't ask the deck force to come down and clean the bilges when I'm down there. So you could... Anyway, he turned me into the skipper. And the
Same skipper?
This was the same skipper, yeah. And he read me a riot act, and he reduced me from a 4.0 to 3.8. And that one time I had been a 4.0 all this time. With all the other problems, they never reduced my rate, my good conduct. But this time, that lousy bosun's mate lost me my good conduct medal.